This lecture in the foundation degree in Building Services and Renewable Energy in the design and installation of renewable energy technologies. So we've already had a look at heat pump, various heat pump technologies. Now what we want to have a look at in a little bit more detail is how a heat pump actually works. So we've already got the general idea of how a heat pump works and what it does. What I want to look at now is that heat pump operation in a lot more detail. So what we're going to have a look at is the workings of a heat pump and how it actually takes the heat from the air or the ground and basically amplifies that low grade heat into a higher temperature heat that's useful for space heating and or domestic hot water applications within the domestic environment. So what we want to look at is how does a heat pump actually work. So the concept behind the operation of a heat pump is actually quite simple once you actually understand the operation of the heat pump cycle. And as the name suggests, a heat pump transfers or pumps heat from one place to another. So it doesn't generate the heat, but it rather moves it from one place to another. And that's where we get the word pump in a heat pump from. So that's highlighted there in red. So notice we use the word pump, which basically means that heat is not generated by a heat pump, but it is moved from one place to another. So we can conceptualize the operation of a heat pump by an analogy with the following little picture of a car engine basically, or a car radiator. So step one, we have a water tank connected to a water pump that goes into a radiator, sort of like a car radiator. You can see there's a fan at the back here blowing air through the radiator, and then the cooler fluid flows back into the water tank again. So basically this is like a little cycle of a heat pump cycle. So step one is the flame. So the flame here is heats up the water. Step two, the hot water is then pumped from our hot water store, our heat source, to the radiator, which is essentially our heat sink. So we have a little water pump here that pumps the hot water into the radiator. The fan forces cold air over the hot radiator and the air becomes hot. So basically you take cold air on this side, goes through the radiator grill, comes out this side as hot air, and then out the top. That cools the water as it goes through the radiator, and the water becomes cold because the heat's been removed by the air, and the cold water is then pumped back into the water tank where it's heated up again, and then we're back to step one. So a very simple little loop that goes around the cycle. So hot water pumped through a radiator, cooled down by the airflow, and then back into the storage tank. So how is that like a heat pump? So in this example, it's the flame that generates the heat, and the heat is transferred to the air using a medium. In this case it's water that's pumped through a radiator. So pumped heat. So basically we've pumped heat from our water tank to a radiator, so essentially what we have is a heat pump. So a real heat pump doesn't differ that much from this example. Basically all that we are doing in a heat pump is that we replace the water, the fluid, with a refrigerant, and we replace the water pump. Instead of a pump we have a compressor, and basically the refrigerant gas is then what's get compressed around this cycle.